In this segment, I'd like to describe the feature adjustment rules, which we can see right here. If I double-click on that node, we see this dialog. And this dialog has three functions. First, we can hide features that are irrelevant to your target language. Second, we can collapse feature values that aren't necessary for your language. And third, we can add new feature values. And I'd like to go through these one by one. So let's go back to hide features. And if we scroll down to the clause section, every proposition in the semantic representations is marked for direct speech. And the values are speaker. There's a feature called speaker, another feature called listener, speaker's attitude, speaker's age, speaker-listener age, and speech style. And by default, these 6 features have been hidden. If your language indicates deference or honor when one person speaks to another, then you'll want to unhide these 6 features, and we can unhide them by unchecking these boxes. And now when I close that dialog and rest the cursor on these features for this proposition, we see that the speaker is a man, in this case John. The listener is a woman, we don't know who. The speaker's attitude is familiar, meaning that John knows this woman, but there's no particular emotion involved, like affection or anger or anything like that. The speaker's age is an adult, somewhere between the ages of 25 and 49. The speaker to listener age, they're essentially the same age, and the speech style is not applicable here. Now, if your language doesn't use that information, if it doesn't need those features, you can hide them. So let's hide speaker, listener, speaker's attitude, speaker's age, speaker-listener age, and speech style. And now those features are no longer displayed in the propositions, in the semantic representations, and they won't appear in your grammar anywhere. So you can hide the features that are irrelevant to your language. You should go through this list and look at them and hide the ones that are irrelevant. Then you can collapse feature values. For example, every object in the semantic representations is marked for a number, and the possible values are singular, dual, trial, quadrial, pockle, and plural. And we need these values in the semantic representations because some languages morphologically distinguish each of these. But if you're working in a language like English, for example, we don't need these values. We only need singular, pockle, and plural. So I'd like to show you how to collapse these, but first, let's go back and look at this rule that we wrote in an earlier segment. And you may remember that whenever we wanted to indicate plural, we also had to include dual and trial and quadrial. Well, when we collapse these values up here, for example, let's collapse dual with plural. So I select it and drag it down. I'll collapse trial with plural and quadrial with plural. Now, the values dual, trial, and quadrial will never appear in the semantic representations. Instead, they will be changed to plural. And when we look down here, now we only see singular, pockle, and plural, because again, dual, trial, and quadrial have been collapsed to plural. So our grammar doesn't have to deal with those irrelevant values. Another place you'll want to collapse feature values is verb time. We have numerous levels of past tense, like immediate past, earlier today, yesterday, 2 days ago, 3 days ago, a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, etc. Similarly, we have multiple values of future, like immediate future, later today, tomorrow, 2 days from now, 3 days from now, a week from now, etc. And we need these values because various languages draw their lines at different places in the time spectrum. But no language will use all of these values, so we can collapse them. Now here it's also very useful to add new values. For example, suppose your language has, let's say, 2 levels of past tense, remote past and past. And let's say that anything that occurred a week or more ago is categorized as remote past, and anything that occurred less than a week ago is just called past. So we can add a new value. Let's call it remote past. Now that value is added to the end of the list, and we can collapse these values. For example, a week ago will be collapsed with remote past. There we go. And similarly, you can drag these other values. Like a month ago, you could collapse it with remote past, etc. Whenever you collapse something, if you want to undo it, you can click the undo button. And now a week ago is back up here. It's no longer collapsed with remote past. There's some defaults. For example, if your language uses just past, present, and future similar to English, you can click that. And now all of the values of past tense have been collapsed to a new value called past. All of the levels of future tense have been collapsed to a new value called future. Timeless has been collapsed with present. We would need to delete that remote past. You can also reset the rule, and now we're back to the original form. Let's look at adding new features. In previous segments, we've talked about how the semantic representations don't have grammatical relations. Instead, they have semantic roles. But many languages have grammatical rules that are based on grammatical relations, not semantic roles. So it's very helpful to have a feature called grammatical relation added to your noun phrases. So we can activate a rule. There's a rule here. If you want to see it, just double click there. You generally don't need to do anything with these rules. They're pre-written for you. If you want this rule, all you have to do is activate it there. There are 5 of these that are very helpful. Adverbial clause type. There are numerous types of adverbial clauses like purpose and reason and result and conditional and hypothetical, counterfactual, etc. And each of these types is triggered by a particular relation. In other words, a particular preposition in the semantic representations. And again, you can see this rule if you'd like by double-clicking here. I won't go into all the details, but the rules are here. They're written for you. You can activate this one by checking that box. Also, stative clause type. There are equative stative clauses in class membership, attributive, existential, locative, possessive, etc. Let's activate that one. If your language has any mechanism, any grammatical mechanism for promoting a patient to the topic, then it probably uses voice, and you can activate this to distinguish between active and passive. And then also adding a feature to noun phrases called relativized is also very helpful. So I'm going to activate those 5, and now when I close this dialog, if we rest our feature on the phrase, we'll see a new feature down at the bottom called grammatical relation, and this particular one is set to subject. And you can see its history, if you rest your cursor down here, how grammatical relation was changed from unspecified to no grammatical relation to oblique, and then oblique to subject, etc. This noun phrase has been set to object. So those are very helpful features. You can hide the features that are irrelevant to your language. You can collapse feature values that you don't need in your language, and then you can also add those 5 features. And then once you've added these features, you can write subsequent grammatical rules that will use that information, will use those feature values, and then make the appropriate change, whether it's a morphological change or adding something or reordering the constituents appropriately, etc. Your other grammatical rules can use those features and make the appropriate changes. And that concludes this segment.